Rest is so precious. All of the awareness right now, and I think part of it is because we're exhausted. The level of tension after COVID and during COVID took a lot out of us that we might not be really thinking about consciously. It's just interesting to see what our experience is with rest and how many other people in our culture are on the same page. That we're not the only ones who are feeling tired and activated by what's going on in the world right now. That kind of activation is really hard. It really takes a lot of energy to stay present. Rest as strength is our particular focus today. Interesting to look at rest because we think, what's so interesting about rest? We all rest, sleep, we don't sleep. It seems kind of personal. And some of us take a lot of ownership over that, like, oh, I work all the time, or I have really a lot of trouble with my sleep. And what we're looking at now is broadening that context so that it's more than just personal. That we live in a culture that makes it very hard to rest. What does that feel like in our body as we acknowledge that? Resting gives us strength. I, for years, have worked many more than 40 hours a week, every job that I've ever had, and really like that feeling of inclusion, of being one of the ones that was there at 7 in the morning and sometimes stayed later, depending on the job. But I always felt like I was part of something if I was working too much. Just to indicate that there's rewards for that. And also, I can really see, especially looking back, that a lot of the times when I was doing that, I was sacrificing my own health, my own emotional health, my physical health. We're part of a culture that really encourages that, that rewards us in a lot of different ways. And often we don't really see the drawbacks. So, challenging limiting beliefs is another way that we try to avoid feeling weak. What's the matter with you? You're an adult. Why do you have to have a nap in the middle of the day? There must be something wrong with you if you can't just keep going and going and going and going, especially as we're getting older. If you used to be able to do that and now you can't. When we're looking at that, we need to have a lot of compassion for ourselves because it's not something that we've done on our own. It's not a pattern we've created on our own. We live in a culture that encourages this. And learning how to say no, learning how to protect our time in a different way so that we have time for rest is also very important. This is from Tricia Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance. We're going to do a few different inquiries based on this book. So she says, we finally wake up to the truth of what a machine level pace of labor has done to our physical bodies, our self esteem, and our spirits. That's a really powerful description of that for me, machine level pace of labor. And it really is what our culture demands and expects of us. A lot of people now are saying, oh, these younger people, they don't really like to work. And that's not been my experience with younger people. I think there is a rejection of work at that machine level pace is not okay. They're not willing to pay the price of perhaps what we did, just not even thinking about it. Tricia calls this grind culture. It's our everyday behaviors, how we work with each other, how we engage with each other, how we judge people for not being a financial success. And it just really centers always being at work. Overworking is a badge of honor, being part of the in group. And how many times have we heard people say, oh, I'm so exhausted, I'm working too much, and then not be able to really pull back from that? Certainly that's been my experience too. What she's also doing is not just identifying what is wrong, but also bringing us into a vision of we are freedom making. We honor our bodies with rest. And when we're resting, we have that opportunity to connect to the deeper layers of ourselves. So, grind culture just perpetuates this belief that there's always something more we could be doing. The house could be cleaner. We could balance that checkbook to the penny. There's all of these ways that we could be better somehow. And it really fits in with core deficiency beliefs on I'm not good enough, something wrong, I should do better. Grind culture views our bodies as machines, and actually, our bodies are sacred. She calls it out as sleep deprivation is both a public health and a spiritual issue. Let's pause here for a moment. What are your thoughts about how this culture shows up in your life? And what would change if you prioritized rest as an act of resistance? One of the ways that our culture keeps us quiet is by overworking. We literally don't have the time and energy to see clearly what's going on and to resist. Take a moment to feel that in your body. What would change? Rest as an act of resistance, of building strength, of resilience. Rest supports our grieving by allowing space. So, this sentence, the trauma of grind culture, that would indicate that there's something to heal from. She talks about colonization, capitalism, white supremacy. To be colonized is to buy into that lie that we're only worth what we produce, and how we're indoctrinated into this cult of urgency and disconnection. And I think that's a very familiar feeling for most of us. Part of the urgency comes from our nervous system that senses there's something really wrong. Then we also have that disconnect that happens with trauma. A lot of people are really disconnecting because it's too intense, it's too much to stay connected. We can rejoice just with this knowledge as we remove that veil of conditioning. What are your feelings about that? Part of what I feel around that is anger, grief for what I've given up or not allowed myself to experience over the years because I was always working. What do you feel about all of this? Notice that in your body. How do you feel in your body? Take a few breaths. We can rest with this for a while. Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey. You might close your eyes, kind of settle back. I'll drop these words in. I wish you rest today. Take a few breaths, relax your shoulders, let yourself be supported. I wish you a deep knowing that exhaustion is not a normal way of living. Exhaustion is not a normal way of living. You are enough. You can rest. Resist anything that doesn't center your divinity as a human being. Deep breath. Resist anything that doesn't center your divinity as a human being. You are worthy of care. For the next several minutes, imagine a world without oppression. Envision a world centered in justice. Lean back, close your eyes. What would be the same and more in this world? What would be something you challenge? What would not be here? Envision a world centered in justice where you had time to rest, to be. Breathe that in. There are many elements of this. Economic justice, where people wouldn't have to work so hard to meet their basic needs. Environmental, gender, equality, and justice. Heteronormativity would be gone. What are some of the ways that come to mind of types of oppression that you are affected by and that you care about? And then one by one, let's imagine into if those were not here, if our world was centered in justice. Take the time to feel the grief, the anger, the cost of that type of oppression, and to imagine into a world where that didn't exist, where there was justice in that area. Stay in touch with your body and your breath. What would that feel like in your body to set aside your work, come into the end of the day with more ease? Let yourself imagine that in your whole body, feel it in your body. Let your mind wander off into this visualization, a world without oppression, a world that honored me as a human being instead of pushing me into overwork, into exhaustion, a world where I'm valued for who I am.